Hash, 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 hash. Faith, 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 faith. Freedom, 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 freedom.
Good morning. Welcome back to the Space Between with Sean McClellan, your humble host and void specialist. Today, I have a very special guest for you guys. Reneau Peurifoy is an international author, known therapist, and teacher. Over his 4-decade career, he has written books that have been translated into multiple languages. He has appeared on numerous radio and television programs, as well as many podcasts. The Anxiety Disorders Association of America, the nation's primary organization for anxiety-related problems, has invited him to speak at 11 of their natural conferences. Reneau, thank you so much for taking time today. It really is an honor to have you here today with all the work you've done.
Well, it's a delight to be here.
So you just finished a book, and the book title really captured me. Why You Feel the Way You Do.
Yes.
Out of 25 years of working with therapists, for counselors and marriages and anxiety, why this book and why now?
Well, actually, I had retired, and then I was contacted by a former client, actually, who was a book agent, and she asked me to do another book. And so after thinking about it and just the way things are today, I just thought a book about emotions that really that explains what they are and how to manage them in a better way would be really useful, especially with just all the anger and anxiety and other stuff that's going on around the country. A lot of misunderstandings about emotions. And it's something that's just fascinated me since I was a little kid.
So for your line of work, did something happen when you were younger that kind of put you on a path of wanting to help people and to counsel people and to your profession? What happened along your journey in life to kind of lead you on that path to become a therapist and help people?
Well, as a kid, both my parents came from farming backgrounds, and so I was in 4-H. We had chickens and rabbits and cats and dogs and a parrot, and I trained the chickens to stand up on little things and all that type of stuff. And so just behavior of animals always fascinated me. And so when I got my bachelor's in biology, my major was animal behavior. And then I had a friend that was a counselor, and I really liked what he was doing. And so I moved from animal behavior to human behavior, which sometimes I joke is a step down, but but a lot of parallels, and it's just I've always liked helping people. I always liked doing things that benefits others, and so that kind of is how I got into it, and it's just been a fun ride ever since.
So you talked about animal behavior. I mean, human beings are clearly animalistic. How does the mind-body connection affect our emotions?
Well, quite a bit. I mean, if you look at neurobiology, we have what are called affects, and there's like 3 levels of them. The bottom level is your sensory stuff, like heat, cold, pressure. The next level up is what they call the homeostatic, the things that keep a balance in your body, like thirst and hunger. And then emotions are actually the highest level of that. And they're drivers. They cause us to do things. And certainly genetics plays a role into it, your background, the interaction between those things. And so the emotions drive you to take care of needs, take care of you to avoid threats. They cause you to be sad when you miss things that are important to you. And that's part of that bonding that's so true in all mammals. We have 2 circuits, one a caring circuit and one a separation anxiety. You see that in babies when the parent is missing. But as adults, that's what helps us to bond. And of course, that's not always true with everybody. There is a small group of the population that has, some genetic variations where these circuits don't work well. Or if you come up in a background of deprivation, sometimes these circuits will shut off. But yeah, they're part of our wiring. Certainly, our moods, the things we expose ourselves to will affect all that stuff, but it's just part of our nature. We want to connect with people, we want to explore our environment, and we want to avoid loss and we want to avoid threat.
Right. So one of your things, your pillars in your book, it says how triggers form and how to quiet them. Me having a lot of addiction in my past, triggers specifically have to do with environment. How important is environment in our day to day in regards to our emotions and things that can potentially trigger us to kind of send us on a downward spiral, I guess?
Well, I think to understand that, you need to kind of understand how the mind works in terms of emotions. Emotions are indexes for your memories. So as memories get formed, if there's something going on that's important to you, there's an emotional tag on it. And then those emotional tags allow those memories and those things that were going on at that time to come up into your mind. And there's a part of your brain that's always scanning the environment, looking for these things that have emotional triggers, both positive and negative. And whenever you encounter them, then you notice those things. A good example would be, like when my wife was pregnant, right? You see pregnant ladies all over the place, right? Then as your kids get older, you don't see them anymore. As your if your kids are in grade school or high school, you see kids at that same level, and it's because at that point in time, those things are important to you. And so your mind pulls them out of the environment and you notice them. And so likewise, if you've had trauma or something that's taken place, that's negative, then your brain is going to be on alert for anything that indicates that. So if you're in a car wreck, sounds, odors, environmental things. For example, if the car wreck happened on a curve during the rain, you might be driving at night, hit a curve that kind of resembles it. The rain's going down. The brain immediately says danger, danger, and so then you become alert. You might just experience it as anxiety. You might experience it as panic. It depends on how you're wired and how that works. The example I give in the book is of people that are in a plane where it's gets struck by lightning, and so the next time they want to get on a plane, of course, there's some anxiety there because the brain has associated air travel with danger because of that experience of having, the big thunder happening in the plane and everything being shaken and all that.
Is that something that happens on a subconscious level or that happens consciously?
It's an automatic unconscious process. Most of your day, you're unconscious. If you just think about walking down the street, your brain is looking at objects. It's evaluating dangers. It's evaluating obstacles that might get in front of you, and you're busy thinking about what am I going to have for lunch? Who am I going to talk to? Gee, that TV program last night was interesting, and you're not even conscious of all the stuff going on at an unconscious level. And so at the same level, all of these things that during your life, you've identified as positive and negative are your brain is kind of looking out for them. And anything that had an importance in the past, it'll pull out of the environment and make you aware of it when you encounter it. And that's kind of nice because if we had to think about everything all the time, we won't get much accomplished. The fact that we can do so much stuff automatically really frees us up to do all kinds of other stuff.
You say it frees us up, but I've been told before, maybe you can correct me on this. We think about 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day that cross our mind, right?
67,000 faults.
Thoughts that cross our
Thoughts.
minds. Yeah.
Well, yeah. And most of that's just kind of, comes and goes, right? And again, anything that has an emotional tag on it are the ones that you become more aware of. Oh yeah, I'm thinking about all kinds of crazy stuff as I go through. In fact, my brain, the way it's wired, I think Monty Python, I would be a good writer for them because I see all kinds of weird connections sometimes. I laugh at it, but I move on.
um, I want to ask you something in regards to our culture, in regards to dopamine. I feel
Mhm.
like today a lot of people are chasing a dopamine hit, and our mind is constantly being stimulated 24/7. Do you think there's a connection to that specific idea in regards to anxiety disorders and things that people are facing today with just being overstimulated and over chasing that dopamine hit?
It is, and again, that's nothing new. People have been doing that for thousands of years. Just we have so much opportunity to get so much of it, more of it now. When I first started practicing many years ago, even before the internet, the first thing I would tell my clients is quit watching the evening news. And that in itself helped at some, at least a low level.
Sure.
Because if you get this constant bombardment of negative stuff, again, your brain just starts to become on alert all the time. And one of the big problems with the internet, especially with younger people, is what they call the fear of missing out. You see all of these curated images. People are having wonderful lives. Everybody's having more fun than I'm having. Everybody looks better than I look. Everybody's just doing better in life than I'm doing. And so it creates a lot of anxiety, especially when you're comparing yourself with all these things that really are false images because you don't see them when they're having a bad day or when they're grumpy or that type of stuff.
So it says here you turn really simple, easy to understand terms and apply them to daily life. What can my listeners do in their life to get better control of their thoughts on a day-to-day basis to keep them in a more positive state of mind, and not let the kind of the negatives of this world take them down this a rabbit hole of inadequacy and unworthiness? Like, what are some good tools that they can use to kind of shift their mindset perspective in their
Well,
daily life?
well, that's a broad question, and maybe if we look at it from the eagle's perspective, the things that make a person happy.
Sure.
The latter part of the book, I talk about what positive psychology has identified as probably the three most important things in life. Number one, most people can guess, it's relationship. Having deep, meaningful relationships, people you can connect with, who can be you can be transparent with. And so many times you'll hear people, yeah, I got 500 Facebook friends, right? But who can you really tell your troubles to? Who can you really empathize through at a deep level? And so many people in our culture are so isolated. I think that's one of the biggest things is developing a network of people that that you can connect with at that level, at that deep level, meaningful level. And you can do it through churches, you can do it through social organizations. A lot of people don't have family. In the past, people had extended families. They had a neighborhood that they grew up in where they knew those people since childhood. We don't have that nowadays. We're moving around. We have our garage door opener. We got our earphones on. We can spend the whole day without even having a meaningful interaction with somebody else. And so that's one of the first things. Of course, the second one is purpose, and the third one is meaning. Meaning being, why am I here? What's life all about? Is there life after death? Those types of questions, which in our culture we don't think about much. And a lot of people just they get their meaning from very superficial things. So because we don't think about those things, when things interrupt our lives, death, injury, loss, whatever, those types of things, we don't have much to fall back on. People who are well grounded in those three areas can experience tremendous difficulty in life, and yet they'll still come out relatively intact.
It's fascinating. Fascinating. You said purpose, and meaning for life. My father just passed away recently. We talked about that the other day, and if anything, it's given me a sense of urgency to really figure out what my purpose. Why am I here? I think a lot of people don't have that instinct and ask that question enough. Do you think there's a reason behind that we're not asking and seeking our purpose for being here?
Well, again, there's several reasons, but one of them just has to do with the fact that we've become such a secular community. We don't think about, if you will, spiritual things. The other term for that is existential stuff. We're too busy with the latest fashions, with the latest entertainment, with the latest personalities, and following those kind of superficial things, so that we never take time to really think about it. And I think that's the other part is we don't take time. Uh, People are rushing from one activity into another. Having a prayer or a meditative or a quiet time where you sit down and you kind of take a look at your day, kind of take a look at, well, where am I at with my goals? What are my life goals? What is it that I want to accomplish, and how am I doing about that? With that, am I on track? Am I not on track? If I'm not, how can I get on track? Is there somebody I need to talk to? Is there something I need to do? Most people don't think deeply about those things because they're too busy with this overload of media in their life. So turning things off becomes really important.
You think that's by design? You think there's a reason
No,
behind the
we've
way we're getting information that's kind of thrown at us at warp speed every single day?
well, information, they want you to buy stuff, right?
Sure, yeah.
So, and the two things that sell are threat and sex, right? And so you see a lot of that. Yeah, I mean, that's
Yeah,
advertisement, right? It's either
yeah.
got to be novel, something you haven't seen. So you see something funny, you see something, well, gee, are people going to be aware of how you smell or whatever? Or is there, some sex involved? And those are the three things that are advertising you see over and over, and they're primary stimulators for our emotional system. And again, it's the overload. So it's not, I think, by some evil overall design. I think we've kind of stumbled into this, and the fact that uh, people want to be heard, and so they figure ways to monetize it. I mean, you go on the internet, you look for a pair of socks, and pretty soon your browser, all you see is socks advertisements come up, right?
I'm sure after this conversation today, I'm going to have all sorts of stuff popping up in my fever nose, but it's okay.
Yeah. Well, we don't have to do it all today, so.
Yeah, no worries, my friend. You mentioned something a second ago about quiet time in men. I just went through a study called Every Man a Warrior, and
Uh-huh.
this book specifically hones in on men in particular having quiet time every day to kind of connect with God, and just kind of have a place where they can just sit and be still for a moment. How critical do you think that is for human beings in general to take time and just kind of process life and be still?
Up until the modern era, people had lots of opportunity for quiet time. You're out working in the fields, you're traveling someplace. And so you had a lot of time to mull over your day and to think about some of these deeper things as well as some of the superficial things. Um, and yeah, it's essential. I know with myself, if when I start skipping my time, uh, my wife will point it out. I get a little squirrely. Uh, but yeah, it's and just in working with people, that was something I found, especially with anxiety disorders, taking some time to be quiet and to kind of reconnect on those deeper levels with God and those spiritual things that give meaning to your life, and also kind of center you. They center your soul and your spirit, so that you can face the things that are coming at you with just more energy and more of a settled soul, if you will.
Well, let's see. Another part of your book, you talk about identifying negative core response patterns that drive your reactions
Hmm.
to people and events and how to change them. To me, I think a lot of people live in the past. They live in their negative self, and they don't know how to be present in their life because they're living in the negative past. That they keep reminding themselves of those memories. Those core responses that you mentioned, how difficult is it to change them, and what is a process that someone can start using during that to move them along to get out of that phase?
Well, first, let me say there's positive as well as negative core responses. It's a combination of both. Uh, and as you grow up as a child, you you gain a worldview about what are people, events, and how do I fit into all of that. Those become kind of an automatic response pattern, and it's part of it is your belief system, but also it's partly an automatic response pattern based upon your beliefs and your experiences. So if I grow up in a nurturing family, um, and I've got a nice solid spiritual background, I feel pretty good about myself, and I feel pretty good about my abilities to accomplish the things I want in life. So I can succeed. I'm okay. Those kinds of core belief patterns are expressed in how I deal with life. If I come up in a family where those things aren't present, then I might develop core belief patterns like people are dangerous. I can't be safe. I'm inadequate. And now that becomes again a complex response pattern that I start acting out as I become older. So let's take the idea of, oh, conflict is dangerous. A child comes up in a family where if they confront the parent, they get stomped on. So, depending upon their genetic makeup and their personality, they may either become a fighter or they might become passive, right? So, somebody who's become passive as an adult now, they're at work or they're with their friends, and when any kind of conflict comes up, they immediately will back off. And then oftentimes they'll come in, they'll talk to me and say, I don't understand why I can't speak up. I don't understand why I don't do that. And it's because it's this core response pattern that conflict is dangerous in their life. And that's the thing that they need to start to address. And what I find the first step is kind of being really clear as to why you're this way. And that doesn't change anything, but people waste a lot of time in what I call circular why questioning or circular can't thinking, both of those two. I don't understand why I do this. I don't understand why I can't do that. And they'll just go kind of around in a circle without an answer. And yet, when you sit down and really talk to them, they understand where that comes from. It's just that, you know, they keep coming back to, I don't understand why. And so having a clear answer, well, I grew up in a family where I was not allowed to speak up. And when I did, bad things happened to me. And so I learned to keep my mouth shut and to stay under the radar. Okay, that would be a simple explanation. Okay, now, next step is where does that come up in your life? and you come up with a whole list of things where it comes up with my mate, it comes up at work in these situations, it come up when I'm out with my friends, if I'm at a restaurant and they say I shouldn't order something, then I immediately acquiesce, even though that's something I wanted. So you come up with a list of things like that, and then you decide, okay, what are some opposite behaviors I can start practicing? And you start with the easier ones first, and you just start practicing those opposite behaviors in a very conscious way. And at the same time, you come up with things to tell yourself, what they call coping self statements. I can tell myself things like, I'm safe. I'm an adult now. My parents aren't here anymore. That's in the past. So I can speak up. I have the ability to do that. I had one lady who, at work, when she had to meet with her fellow employees with a boss, she would be very quiet and want to speak up. And she identified, well, it's because he sounds a lot like my parent. And so I get triggered when I go in there and I get nervous and I don't want to say anything. And so she started doing that type of self-talk as, okay, I'm safe. He's not my parent. He's just my boss. I don't have to be afraid of him. And she just started practicing saying one thing at a meeting to begin with. And eventually she got comfortable in that situation. She desensitized to it because a lot of this stuff is just basically a process of desensitization. When you work with a simple phobia like fear of water, a person has to go through a process of desensitization so those triggers will quiet down. They never go away completely, but you can get them where they're quiet most of the time. They will sometimes reappear when you're sick, hungry, tired, or under stress. Uh, and that's just the way it is. And when those occasional times come up, you use the same tools to quiet them. And back when you're feeling good again and you're on top of stuff, usually they quiet back down again and you're able to function well. So that's the general process. Sometimes it takes a little bit more. It's a more detailed than what I've just outlined, but generally those are the four things: having an explanation, identifying where you're triggered, coming up with some opposite positives you can practice, and then having some self-talk you can use to help calm the anxiety or the anger that comes up when you are triggered.
Do you think most people are aware of this?
Oh
I've been
no,
through a lot of counseling and I'm aware of all this stuff, but like going through this process of like positive self-talk for yourself, I
Mhm.
definitely do that on a daily basis to keep my mind in a positive frame of mind outlook. But do you think most people are even aware of this as they go
Oh
about their
no.
day, or they just kind of think this is the way I am? Oh well.
Well, yeah, most people aren't because again, we don't take time to think about it. There's not a lot of, even though, mental health awareness has become much more available nowadays and people know more about it. I think most people really don't ever think much about what they're doing. They just blindly keep doing what they've been doing. And which is again why it's nice to have some quiet time and have some time to, you know, eh, access some of the types of information we're talking about right now, because it gives you the opportunity to look at, well, this is an area of my life that maybe I need to deal with. I had one person, whenever his wife would make a suggestion to him, he would get really angry, right? And so we traced it back to the fact that his mom was extremely critical, and he would just bristle when over all this criticism he had. And so when his wife would make a suggestion, even though it was a very innocent one, it sounded like his mom. And so he was being triggered off of that. And so after he identified that, he realized that I need to start when I feel that that immediate kind of response, tell myself, she's not my mom, she's my wife. She's just saying this shirt would look nice on me. I don't have to be defensive. And over time, he did desensitize to it. And again, that process of desensitization is what's so important because so much of our information is insight oriented. Once you understand what's going on, everything's going to be fine. And that's just not the way the brain works. We're not a computer where you erase things or you rewrite the program. We're an organic system. So like a muscle has to be trained and you have to develop it, your habit patterns, these unconscious response patterns, you have to work with them over time to desensitize and change them. And again, like I said, sometimes they will pop up when you're sick, hungry, and tired. So just be aware of that. When that happens, people will sometimes say, "Well, I don't understand. I'm right back to where I started." No, you're not. It's you had some your brain's not working the way it normally works because you're sick, hungry, tired, or stressed out, and some triggers came up, and an old memory got triggered.
You said something earlier about mental health awareness, and I want to touch on this for a second because I think that for the longest time in America that this was kind of on the back burner. I think we're seeing a lot of things now in the news and like things going on with the kids in particular. How important is it to get a grip on this to give people the help they need so they can start moving through some of the processes that you're talking and you teach about? Because I think if we don't address it, I think we're going to be in a bad way, if not already we are.
Well, no, it's you have a lot of people are suffering in a lot of different ways because of past experiences. We do live in a broken world, and things are not uh, the way they should be. A lot of kids grow up in homes where there's things going on that probably shouldn't be going on, and so people do carry a lot of negative core response patterns. Most people are able to get through life okay, but there's a lot of people that just, it really interferes with their life. And so being aware that there is help, that there are tools you can use to change some of these patterns becomes super, super important.
You touched a little bit on core beliefs as well. How important are those for anyone? And when are those typically developed? By what age are those core beliefs kind of set in stone for a person?
Well, lifetime. I mean, they're constantly changing. I mean, you start off as a child, you have these basic emotional responses to threat and loss and that type of thing. And then those responses are kind of tweaked as your mind starts to develop uh, a model of reality. Again, what are people about? Who's safe, who's not safe? What can I do? What can I not do? And that now starts to modify that whole subconscious belief system. But again, it can be changed as an adult. In fact, if you're on a growth mode, you should be different by the time you're 70 than you were when you were 20. And these core beliefs will have changed as you've experienced things, as you've worked with things, as you've understood people. When you look, for example, people when they first get married, oftentimes their behavior is somewhat infantile towards each other, and that's because they learned about relationships and intimacy when they were young. Their behavior at work is more adult because they learned about work when they were older. Now, over time, of course, that's all going to change, and hopefully you have a more uniform response at work and at home and with your friends and that sort of stuff. Uh, so yeah, so core response patterns are constantly changing. They get laid down early in life, but you don't have to be stuck with them. Some people are; they never change. They have the same core beliefs at 70 as they had when they were 12, and that's sad because that often means that they're missing out on life, sometimes doing a lot of damage to the people around them.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
So it says here your first book, Anxiety, Phobias, and Panic, Taking Charge and Conquering Fear.
Hmm.
I got a question about faith and fear. Those two things we can't see. Why do most people buy into the fear aspect of that and not the faith aspect?
I'm not completely sure what you mean by that. Uh, by faith aspect of fear, you mean that the idea that perfect love casts out fear? That idea?
Well, faith and fear are both two things we can't physically see as human beings, right?
Right.
We can either think we can either be afraid or we can either act in faith.
Well, but fear does have concrete stuff. I mean, when you become frightened, there are specific, again, fear and anger are both about threat. When I feel threatened, I become angry or I become afraid. And again, when I talk about anger, I'm talking about everything from irritation to rage, fear, everything from just apprehension to panic. Your brain looks at the threat and decides how well can I manage it. If I can manage it, then I'll become angry and I'll do something to get rid of it. If it's going to be unmanageable, like a grizzly bear, then I'm going to become afraid and want to get away from it. Now, threats, again, can have a very concrete aspect or they can be abstract. So, threat can be, somebody who might be threatening my life. Threat can also be loss of status, loss of affection, loss of things that are precious to me, loss of my job, which gives me meaning. So, those are fairly concrete things. Now, they also do move into the idea of faith because faith also has a role in what threats really are, what are true threats and what are not threats. So I think those two do interact that way.
No, I have enjoyed every bit of this session today with you. What is the best way my listeners can get in touch with you to purchase your books or just find out more about what you do right now?
My website's probably the easiest way, and it's whyemotions.com. And from there, you can get into links to my YouTube videos and the books, and I've got some free downloads there. So anything you want to know about me, whyemotions.com, and that has links to where you can buy the book and all those sort of things. And I might mention the book's also in audio, so you can have it both in print or audio version.
One last question, Reneau. What does success look like for you?
Oh, success for me has a lot to do with when I meet my Lord, he's going to say, "Well done."
Well done, good and faithful servant. I
Yep.
love it. I love it. Reneau, thank you so much for taking time to speak with me today. And we will see you next time on The Space Between.
And just like that, another void has been filled in the space between. Hey, listen, you're obviously a podcast listener. You're listening to this podcast, which I appreciate you. Have you ever thought about launching your own? Are you somebody who feels like I've got a message, but I'm not quite clear what it is or who would ever want to hear it? Let's do this. Let's have a conversation. I'll kind of take you behind the scenes of the Space Between podcast, show you how I do it, and worst case scenario, you'll have 3 really simple steps that you can use right now to understand what your message is and how to get it out there. Go to linkwithsean.com, SEAN, linkwithsean.com, book a call, pick a time that works for you, and let's have a conversation about you and your message, all right? We'll see you on the call.